Hello everybody and welcome back to the Human Echoes recap for Channel Zero, The No End House, Episode 6, The Hollow Girl. Wrapping it all up with this one, folks. 5 great episodes leading into this one. Expectations sky high. And just to sort of let you guys know where I'm at right off the bat, I don't feel like my sky high expectations were met, but I didn't hate this. I felt like this was okay. Episode opens up really strong, okay? We've got Margot and the father thing eating eggs inside the house. You get that great close-up shot on the eggshells, which has been this motif that's sort of repeated throughout the season. And here they are, and they're discussing his meal, right? She's eaten her meal. He's made her breakfast. She's had her hard-boiled eggs. Love some hard-boiled eggs. And looks like some French toast. And he's going to have a memory. Over easy memory there. And there's a great... I enjoy the discussion here between these two because the father thing knows that there are only a limited amount of memories that he can pull from and eat before Margot turns into a husk. And indeed, she kind of already is turning into a little bit of a husk. And he's trying to space this out as much as possible because his character, despite his ravenous hunger for these memories, also really loves her. He is built out of her memory of a loving father, so he's wants to protect her as much as he can. And he says, listen, I can go for a little longer without anything. I don't need another memory. And she says, no, I got something for you. And she gives him another one of her memories. And I love the way they set this one up because it's very, very clear that this is something that she's doing of her own volition. In the past, the father thing has snuck up on her, or it's sort of been she wasn't super into it, but here she actually describes the memory that she's going to give him as he's taking it out of her mind. And it's this really beautiful afternoon that she and her dad had before he died. And they went fishing and they had apples, and he has this great line which sort of plays into what the house is about how if you see an apple coming out of the water with line attached to it, watch out because that's the fish fishing for you. I thought that was really, really great. And it seems that Margot has settled into this life inside the house, right? She's happy with Seth. We see them sort of going about their normal lives. They have walks, they have sex, they eat food. They're just sort of subsisting in this house. But on the outside, Jules is counting the days, all right? It's been a year for her too. She's been marking off the calendar. It seems like, Jules, just set yourself a reminder on your phone or something. You still have a wall-mounted calendar, Jules. Did the egg take your ability to use a phone? Did it remove your memories of how to use a swipe keyboard? Man, that would suck. That's a bad memory to lose, guys. Don't lose that memory. Jules, though, is coming back to the house. Fortunately, it's on the continent, right? I thought about, what if it shows up in Japan? Jules doesn't seem like a person of a lot of means. How is she going to get to the house? But it's in Quebec, so she can drive there. I assume there's somewhere kind of up northern area as well, so it probably isn't way far. But she gets up there, she goes to the house, and who should she see outside but Seth? Seth is there waiting for her, and maybe not waiting for just for her. He's in the deep sea fish that is the house. Seth is the little light gland that it dangles out in front of its mouth, right? That's sort of my metaphor. And Seth talks about how it's an organism too, which I do enjoy. And speaking of Seth, we dig a little bit more into his backstory in this episode. We keep cutting back to, we know that the family in the cage is his family now. That those were his memory eaters, and he trapped them in this cage. And we get a little more backstory. He tells Margot that there's nothing left that he wants to lose to feed to them. That he's given them all of his bad memories. He's chosen the memories that he doesn't want them to have, that he doesn't want to have, and now that he needs them just to sit there inside the cage. And another interesting piece of information, which I kind of feel like it would have been nice if we got earlier, but I understand sort of it didn't maybe really fit. He mentions that the memory eaters don't die as long as the host is alive. As long as there's still a memory to be consumed, they just get hungrier and hungrier, but they don't waste away like the dude we saw in the field in episode 4, I believe it was. They just sort of wait for their opportunity. Setting a lot of stuff up for the finale of the episode. But as I mentioned, Seth brings Jules in, and the house has changed, right? The configuration is morphed around because it can do that, right? Of all the things that it can do, it's that seems pretty normal. And Seth gives this pitch to Jules about the house. He talks about how it's this organism and how it's this beautiful thing. Seth is enamored with the house and everything that it can do. And Jules, really understandably, honestly, I'm a little bit insulted. Like, I thought Seth was smarter than to try to convince Jules, but I think that's just how excited he is about the house. Like, he just can't imagine that other people aren't willing to buy into it, even though, like, they might, logically speaking, there's no reason why Jules would be like, yeah, actually, you know what? Now that you think about it, I am going to stay here forever. She just wouldn't do that. But Seth is not able to see through his love of the house to comprehend that until Jules just flat out tells him, you're crazy, I'm getting Margot, and we're getting out of here, okay? So let's go. And then he attacks her and puts her in a house with the egg. Now, here is probably the biggest disappointment of the episode. And it's not... I'm going back and forth on the egg thing because throughout the series, we've essentially had zero big twists and reveals. Like, the idea that Seth was working for the house, okay, that's kind of a big thing. But this show has not run on those types of revelations. And the way that they resolve the egg continues that particular trend. It turns out that the egg is just Jules' representation of her guilt over not helping Margot. And that it's kind of Margot inside the egg trying to get to her. And Jules just felt so bad about not being there to help her and help her through her hard time that she was, harboring all this guilt. I was expecting something more. Okay? I wanted something more. I thought there was a revelation to learn about Jules because as tragic as this is for Jules, right? As tough as I'm sure it is for her to deal with this guilt, it feels... they never adequately explained to me why her interaction with this thing was different than everybody else's interaction with their memory eater. Jules, throughout this series, I assumed that she was willingly giving these memories. And the way that the finale kind of recontextualizes that, it seems like the egg is just hypnotizing her. Like, she cannot resist the egg. Whereas Margot can't resist the father thing, but it's a choice for her. Like, she loves him so much that she doesn't want to give him up. That makes sense to me. The Jules thing and the egg, that doesn't make sense as far as why she was giving so many of her memories, because I thought at the time that the memories that she was giving to the egg were voluntary things, just like what Seth did, where she wanted to get rid of her memories of her home life and she was trying to purge all that out, and that's why she couldn't remember her mom and her sister and all, like, the important things in her life. I feel like if I could talk to the creator of the show, he would probably have a good explanation for why her interaction with the egg is different. I don't think it's just some random thing. But as a viewer, just watching through this, not casually, right? I mean, I'm engaged. I'm taking notes for this thing that we're doing here, like trying to think about why everything works. It's not apparent to me why Jules interacts with the eggs the way she does. And for that matter, why the egg imagery was the predominant imagery, right? Like, because they hit that nail on the head again at the beginning of this episode. Maybe I'm just dense, but it did not come through to me, even now that we're at the finale. What we get from here, though, is really strong stuff, okay? Seth goes back to Margot, and Margot has this idea, and she's kind of losing her grip, right? She's losing these memories, she's losing sort of herself, but she has enough memory left after this year in the house to say, we need to close the door. We got to stop people from coming in. And Seth, with his love of her even so, is also really in love with the house and kind of tries to steer her away from that. Not like in a violent way at first, just a sort of manipulative way. And the relationship between Margot and Seth revealed in this episode, the way that he is towards her is such a creepy, manipulative, abusive boyfriend that it's done so well because he's a creep, all right? You get that he's a creep, but you don't think she's stupid for staying with him. You understand how he got his claws into her like this and how he's manipulating her, and it makes sense that she would stay with him and think that he's a good guy and think that he has her best interest at heart. All of that stuff feels right. It feels like a real human relationship, and I think that a lot of times when you have sort of a creepy, domineering boyfriend type character in any media, it's just sort of portrayed as this over the top like douchebag figure, and maybe that does come through sometimes, but I think realistically humans are a lot more subtle and a lot better at camouflaging than that. So I enjoyed that aspect. She does, though, eventually decide to go out, right? Seth wants to stop this, and he goes to the father thing and says, listen, if Margot closes the door, there ain't no new memories for us. There's nothing for you. The house is going to die. You're going to die. And the father thing just slaps it right back in his face. Says, I'm essentially killing Margot. And I know that, and I kind of hate myself. He doesn't say he hates himself, but you can tell sort of he's come to the realization over this year that this is not the person that he wants to be, that he doesn't, as a memory of a father who loves his daughter, he can't be cool with sucking out of all his daughter's memories and just turning her into a lifeless husk. So he knows that she's going to die, essentially, that he's going to die because he won't have any more memories to eat. So he's not on board with Seth's plan, which I love that didn't work out. That Seth tried it, that he thought that he could. I mean, he makes this mistake 3 times this episode of thinking that everybody else is on his side. And that, I think, is the sort of genius of the Seth character as well, because he's an egotist in the most real sense of the word. He just can't fathom that other people aren't on board with the thing that he's on board with. And he tries to convince Jules. He tries to convince the father thing. And then, as Jules goes off... Jules finds Margot, right? She escapes from the egg, stabs her way out of it, which was a cool sequence, although I did have questions again about how did that work? Why didn't her memories all get taken? Because Seth said it's been hungry for a year. It's going to take all your memories, Jules. If it touches you, it touched her. She went inside. Somehow she comes out like birth imagery style, which I guess maybe that's why you get the egg, because she actually managed to be reborn in some sense. But I don't know why it didn't just take all our memories. I don't know. I'm okay with it. Like I like the way the story went, but there's a lot of stuff about the egg that I just doesn't like click for me. But Jules goes and finds Margot, says, "Got something to show you," takes her to this lovely cul-de-sac where there's a house. And also they don't get an explanation of how Jules knows about this. I don't know what's going on there, if there's like missing scenes, if they wanted to have a longer, like there's an hour-long cut of this 6th episode and somehow we just don't have it. But somehow Jules knows about this house. Maybe it's the house where he left her? I don't remember seeing the girl in there at the time. I'm digressing here. They go and find this girl that was Seth's previous girlfriend. Jules says to Margot, listen, he gonna let you turn into a husk too. and he's just going to get another one because that's who he is. Right? He's just churning through women. Again, we knew that Seth was a bad guy, but the way that they've turned him into this realistic douche bro, like loving the people that he's with, right? But also not really caring about how they feel. That's just such a great touch. Seth comes to them to confront them about, leaving. He doesn't want them to leave. He gives a speech again, right, to Margot. Again, Margot doesn't go for it because it's a stupid idea. But they're right there by the cage people, and after Seth sort of berates Margot for not seeing his grand vision of the world, you could see it coming. Like, you knew it was going to happen in the scene, but it was still great. She opens up the cage and sets the memory eaters loose, and Seth is like, attacks her, and the father thing comes to the rescue, and eventually the memory eaters get him, and just the black ichor and the flesh memories that come out of it. I wish that there had been more. I wish we got a little bit more close-up-y stuff with all the flesh memories coming out of the wide oil slick that happened there. That was amazing. There was the reveal before that also, a very beautiful visual thing that I think we saw in the previews, honestly, for like the whole season, where all of Seth's ex-girlfriends, like it's not just the one, right? All of these houses around this cul-de-sac open up, and these girls walk out, and they're like, Seth, and just stand at the end of the driveway. Homage, by the way, I think anyway, to something in A Wrinkle in Time. That was definitely in the trailer, and it's been a while since I read that book, but beautiful sort of tip of the hat to that thing. And we wrap things up with Jules and Margot and the father thing. The father thing knows he has to die. He goes off, sits in the pool. I also don't get what all the pool imagery is here. That's another thing that I wish. I don't need explanations for everything, okay? I understand, like, I don't want to know who built the house. I mean, I kind of do, like, because that's fun, but, like, I'm not mad that the story didn't tell us that. But I want to know more of, like, what the water represents, if this is sort of about the waters of forgetting, if this is a reference of the river of forgetfulness. I think Lethe is the name of it in Greek mythology. Is that sort of what's happening here, or is it just a pool that's in a creepy house and so it has no bottom? I don't know. We don't get an answer to that. But the way this scene plays out is Margot needs to kill the father thing, can't do it, right? Because it's her dad. It looks like her dad. It has treated her like her dad. This thing has loved her this whole time, this year that she's been with him, and she cannot do it. And I love the way this resolves, because Margot by herself is not able to get over this tragedy, and she needs help. And Jules, who was not there for her in the initial run through of their tragedy, comes to her aid and says, listen, I got this one. I'll take this one for you. Stabs the father thing in the stomach. He falls into the pool, and the girls make their way to the exit. Really memorable quote, by the way, I love from Seth earlier. I wrote it down and I forgot to mention it at the time, but the memory is a disease and this house is the cure. That was great. And the moments earlier that I also forgot to call out, I just looked over at my notes and realized I forgot a couple of things I wanted to say. When Jules first comes for Margot and Margot says, this is where I live now. I don't know how to exist outside of this. It's, I think, somewhat a commentary on the grieving process, but also just on a lot of, like, the relationship that she's in with Seth, the sort of abusive boyfriend relationship. It, again, kind of highlights that idea that even if you know something is wrong, like, if you've gotten used to it, if it has become your normal, it becomes very, very difficult to give up. And I thought that in those respects, in the avenue of respecting the truth of human experience, that this show was fantastic. I don't think some of the mystery stuff and the horror elements maybe weren't as strong as they could have been, especially last episode really didn't have much horror in it at all, and a lot of them haven't much, but the very first episode was very strong on the sort of creepy vibe, and they got away from that a lot and just sort of told these people stories as they're inside this house. I would have liked a little more horror. I would have liked some more of the mysteries to be answered, or maybe better explained. My complaints about the egg, I think, are my biggest problem with this episode, because it feels like the Jule storyline doesn't quite wrap up the way I wanted it to. It doesn't quite have enough information for me to feel like she gets her catharsis, right? She gets to come back around all the way and kill that guilt, right? The representation of her helping Margot out finally and killing the father thing and letting her be free of her guilt and all of the sort of the misery that she went through after the suicide. And somebody pointed out on the subreddit, by the way, this is not an original thought, but I did think it was really cool, that both her actual father and her memory father killed themselves to save her. That was an interesting little parallel. But the strength of this show is that it was unfailingly true to its depiction of humanity in all of its, strengths and weaknesses. And I think that the thing the finale does best is it does continue to nail the really complex ways in which humans interact with each other and hurt each other and help each other, and the ways that maybe we don't mean to, or that my dad always said, when I said I didn't mean to, he would say, but did you mean not to? And I think sometimes we're guilty of that. We don't mean to hurt people, but maybe we don't mean not to hurt people as much as we should. And this is a reminder that we need to mean not to. I like this. It left me very contemplative. It was not what I was expecting, where I was expecting to go from this first episode that we saw, with all of the sort of creepy horror imagery. But it's not going to ever, I'm not going to forget this. Like, it's not something that's just sort of, all right, well, that was a scary thing. Moving on. I think this is going to stick with me, and that is, I think, a testament to how powerful it is. So that's it. That's all my thoughts on the Channel Zero No End Cap finale. I hope you guys liked it. I understand some of the complaints that people had, but I think that the aggregate for me was positive. Leave your comments and let me know what you thought. Or if you have some other things that you think that I'm missing about the egg, especially, because I'd love to hear what you guys think about just why that imagery was chosen and what it represents. It feels a little bit appropriate when Jules is reborn out of the egg, but I don't know. I would love to hear what you guys think. Subscribe to the channel. This is going to be the last one for Channel Zero, obviously, but we will continue to do some TV recaps. I've, essentially called off the Z Nation recap. I don't know if any of you are following that. Very different show on Syfy, though. But I really enjoyed Z Nation for a while, and this season just kind of went off the rails. But I'm always looking for something new to talk about on this channel, so if you stick around, there will be something cool eventually. And you're cool right now. Take care, y'all.